Good morning. I need to say good evening, good, really super early morning, and good afternoon to wherever you are listening to in the world. I know we've got people joining us from as far away as Seattle, Washington. Oh my goodness. It's 2 a.m. there at the moment, and they are wide awake. These are my guests. It's Helen and Jeff. So it's Jeff Granville and Helen Nachintu. And I've worked with these guys for quite a few years. I came across Jeff, I can't remember what year it was, maybe 2020, 2021, I can't remember. We were doing the, I've even forgotten the name of the work we were doing. It was the Higher Self Expo, that's it. And we were both guests on there. And I interviewed him, and I was so moved by his story that we recorded a series of chats and conversations all about his experiences. And I'm sure we'll get to that in this show. But from his experiences, this whole new world has opened up to him, including all sorts of things like quantum health, spirituality, all sorts of things mixing in, very much focused around trauma and very much focused around raising the game of natural health and healing. Or actually raising the game of healing full stop and putting a new twist on it. And then Helen, I've known for years as well. And Helen has the Venus Health Academy. And Helen is absolutely an expert in understanding the synergy between our foods and our personalities and our physiology, but also the herbs and the elements. And, you know, she also goes into it, and they are a really dynamic pair. So I've invited them on to talk about biohacking, the effects of trauma on our body. So I'm really looking forward to bringing them on. We've got Owen Lloyd-Martin joining us, saying, hi, everyone. Hi, Owen. How you doing? Please do let us know if you've got questions. Now, I know that this is being shared out to both Jeff and Helen's communities too. So please don't be shy. Put your questions and comments in the chat room, and you can also become part of this co-created conversation. So anyway, let's bring both of them on now. Sorry about the applause. I just needed something. I should have really put this one on. Hang on. That's more you guys, cosmic. So how are you doing? Joining us at 2 a.m. What were you thinking?
I wasn't. I wasn't part of the thinking.
I was the thinking behind it. And yeah, as far as I was concerned, it was good. We were good to go. We were having this conversation this morning when we woke up. So we both woke up and we're just like, oh, okay, we're going on the show at 2 a.m. Get up and get ready. And it's like any normal day, right? And I was saying to Jeff that, this is so much easier for us to do now that, we've got clean diets and we're not toxic. And it's so much more difficult to get out of bed in the mornings if your body's toxic and weighed down. And so it was so easy for us. It's so easy.
Oh, well done, you two, top marks. Because I mean, that is a bit of a dynamic. I don't know if I would go to sleep and get up, or just stay up later and then have a lie in. What's a person to do? So, we've got the title of Biohacking, the Effects of Trauma on Our Body. When I gave you that title or suggested that title, what were your thoughts? What talking points were you automatically generating in your head?
Jeff, do you want to pick this one up?
The first, you know the topics to talk about. We like you said, we have a wonderful history together. And I want to say, for just, if we can start out, that, the energy you bring and the clarity you bring, the history you bring is very unique. And it's, you really show up, you bring everything to the table. And that's kind of what we said this morning, is that this is just another opportunity to show the universe that we will show up. You know, when there's an opportunity to serve, we will show up. And that's, I think, what wakes us up, what excites us, and we're doing something that really resonates with our heart and our connection to the soul. And it's so much easier to get up when you're in that zone and you're not doing something you're dreading. That's the other thing about it. It's all about mindset. So the first thing that came up for me was trauma. I mean, the real core of what I do is how we show up to face trauma, how we show up to face every single day. Just like if we're getting up for this meeting, or if we're getting up to go take my son to the hospital, or if there's an interview today. It's all about your state of receivership of showing up. So to me, showing up to talk about trauma is the most important thing. It's the most important connection to my calling that there is. So that's where I go immediately, is to the core of who we are and how we show up in the world.
Oh, I love that. It's interesting you say that we are showing up, because I got a message from YouTube this morning to say that one of my early videos has just been taken off because it contravenes their
Well, of course it does. Of course it does.
So as we're showing up, we are actually working against energies that might not want us to show up, you know. I am going to be looking, like you say, it's important to show up. I think I might go into the review process and find exactly why it's not allowed to show up anymore. But yeah, it's interesting. It feels like there's a couple of different narratives as well, isn't there? You know, there's one that's very much about self-directed, you know, like where you are at the center of your own healing journey. And then there's another way of you know, like there's I guess there's the outer side agencies that want to get involved and tell you how to heal. And there's a real tension between there. And I can see that both can work, and they can work synergistically, but not without the person really being involved, I think. Where would you like to start then? Oh, I've got a welcome from Carl, by the way. And in case I was looking a little bit shocked as I went on screen, it was because he'd smacked my bottom. And did it. It's very naughty.
I really relate to Carl.
And I really relate to you, Louisa.
Exactly. How rude.
I did wonder at one point, because you look like a little bit shocked. I thought, what's going on her end?
Yeah, exactly. On my end. Yeah. Anyway, it's like a good smack in the morning. It got my energy sort of jolted. So yeah, we're talking about showing up, and I kind of sidetracked it a little bit. I apologize for that. I know that you've been quite involved, Jeff, over the years, you know, with your son's story, you know, McCoy's journey, that you've been involved in working with established medicine, and also bringing in a new form of medicine, a new form of science, and helping those to pair up a little bit. What's your experience of that, and the challenges that, you know, how has that gone, and what have you learned from that whole situation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what we find is, you know, Bruce Lipton talks a lot about the cyclical cycle of, you know, a good idea, it's perfect for the culture, and then it starts to fade, but there's always a new idea coming up. And the Western medical and pharmaceutical industrial complex are an idea whose time has passed. Okay. Just like the petrodollar, and just like, you know, world dominance and things like that, right? Those are things whose time has passed, but they've been held up by groups of people that are in power. Yeah. So anytime that happens, you're going to have tons of propaganda against what's real and the new idea coming up, right? Mm-hmm. So holistic health has been there at the forefront the whole time, and then it's been pushed down by Western culture, and it's trying to come up. You know, there's an upwelling that's happening in humanity for holistic health to come back to the surface, because, you know, the the current society has been holding it down for too long. So what I feel is there's a lot of resistance. You know, if you've got a really bad idea and you want it to hang on for a long time, you really have to be underhanded in order to prop it up and keep it up there. So they're going to resist. I mean, Western medicine knew about holistic medicine before they started, right? So they've known that they have a false paradigm. They know that the natural ways of healing are the ways to go to. So that's why doctors, oncologists who are diagnosed with cancer rarely take the Western medicine route, because they've seen it too many times. They know it's a false paradigm. They wouldn't prescribe it for themselves, but they're forced to be in this box to prescribe it to the general public. And that creates a huge dissonance. So the administration of Western medicine, the hospitals, are stressed to the hilt.
Yeah.
And I bring in here what I'd like to do is offer a free class to the nurses to keep stress out. And they're like, oh, we don't have time for that. You know, it's like they say, you need to meditate for 20 minutes a morning. Unless you don't have time, then you need to meditate for an hour.
Yes, that is so true. We've got Bob Wanger joining us, saying bon dia, glad for this discussion. Hey Bob, thanks for joining us. Feel free to ask any questions as they come up. It's interesting that you said that there's this you know, like there's the new idea of health coming up, and you've correctly said that actually this new idea was the old idea that was pushed aside, and it's now kind of coming back. How do we start to change or adapt the culture? Like, how do we do it when, like you've mentioned, these energies? I mean, this is going to ban the channel for sure, but like, how do we work in such a way that we're providing choice for people in such a way that isn't forcing? Because I noticed that, you know, like presumably when you were talking about the petrodollar, the dominant medical Western culture that has come in, it has forced itself, like you said, you know, it's been quite forceful. It put itself in education, funding, all sorts of different things. And one of the things I notice is, like, you know, when you want to kind of course correct, there is a similar energy where you think, well, we have to force this. But of course, when you're forcing anything, nobody's really changing. Nobody's really learning for themselves. How do we present people with a choice? And I don't know quite how to phrase this question, but like, how can we take a hold? How can natural health and healing, how can that grow and evolve in this very Western culture? Like, what's the first step? What have you been doing? And
I think
because this is what you're both involved in, isn't it?
No, it's important.
Absolutely. A change is definitely needed. And the best way, one of the best approaches I found is that you don't fight against the system. You work within the system. Work with it rather than fight against it. Because if I can speak from the point of view of clients that are coming through at the moment, these are clients that have gone through like several rounds of chemo, and they have been failed by the Western medical complex, right? So I'm not going to say to them, well, you know, you've been through chemo, I'm not going to work with you, kind of thing, you know? And so I'm meeting them at where they're at. If they want to, say, for instance, if they wanted to continue their chemo or whatever other treatment that they're receiving, and they approach me for remedies to help to remedy the side effects of, you know, those treatments, then, you know, I'm going to work alongside that. And I feel like the most important thing is to make my clients feel like they still have a choice, you know, and everything's down to choices, right? So their health is in their hands. It's not down to me to say, oh no, you need to come off chemo before, you know, you can start the holistics. And so I just feel like the best approach, one of the best approaches that I have seen that has worked really well, is to work within the system, like work with the system rather than work against it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I need to just clarify, none of us are actually trained doctors, are we?
No, we're not trained doctors, and I'm only speaking from from my perspective in terms of the things that I have seen working well with clients. I'm not a doctor.
We're not actually prescribing any kind of medical advice either, and we do recommend you get your own advice.
Absolutely.
But the purpose of this is to invite people, I guess, to consider that there are lots of different ways of healing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's I think of, as you're speaking and talking, asking the question, I'm cultivating an answer, and I'm like, oh, this one's for Helen, and she comes out with exactly what I would have said. It's wonderful to be in unison, and the real point, like Buckminster Fuller says, you don't defeat an old paradigm, right? You create a new one that makes the old one obsolete. And we show up with the alternative, right? And the more people see success in the alternative, the more they're just going to stop going to the Western medical and voting with their dollar and supporting that. So we have to just know what's available, how to set up the best state of receivership for whatever has to be done. And that's one of the things. Like, often people get involved in Western medicine due to childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Almost I could go back and
say, give me an example.
Oh, well, I would even back up and say that every single illness and disease, including mental disorders like schizophrenia and bipolarism and multiple personality disorder, all starts with the original trauma, the separation from the true self to the aspect we have to generate to deal with the environment that's troubling us, right?
Yeah.
Create an aspect of ourself, and that creates trauma. And that's the beginning of all disease and illness. So,
oh my God.
and since we have worked together last, that's been my real deep focus, is what is the core? I mean, we talk about, Western medicine. This is one of the big differences. If you have a spot on your skin, they're applying a solution to the symptom.
Yes.
Right? And a solution doesn't mean it's going to work. It's something that they're putting on externally to combat an internal problem. Holistic medicine says, okay, well, the symptom is actually the information. That's the message of what's wrong internally, right? And that's what Helen does so beautifully, which is not what I do. It's all about what she does. Is she can look at, and I, believe me, she's like you're bringing clairvoyance and clarity to astrology and what you do, right? You're bringing, it's just a way for your channel to hit humanity, what you're bringing to humanity. And this is exactly what Helen does. And I had explained that to somebody I was with the other day, is that you're going to get diagnosed just by sitting in front of her. I mean, she can't help but feel what's going on with people and make that diagnosis. So we're coming at it from the inside out. We know that any type of ailment that you can see or feel in your body as a symptom is only the body telling you to pay attention to what's going on. And it's generally the lifestyle that you're living as a result of the trauma you faced as a young child. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've done quite a few recordings with Robert Jardine, who talks about German new medicine, and its key premise is it's a trauma, but not just that it's a trauma. Like German new medicine suggests that one of the most like it says, it's 3 paths to illness, like having an accident that creates some physical changes in your body, which creates an illness. Then there's being poisoned, which I think many people possibly are. And then the third is that, we have a trauma, but he defines it. It's not Robert, but the Dr. Hammer, who like discovered and studied and brought up that science of German new medicine. But he talks about a trauma where we feel isolated. So like where we have a trauma, but we are supported through it and we're able to process it and understand it, we're able to release it from our cellular, our etheric, our emotional, spiritual, whatever body we're talking about. But he defines it as a trauma that we feel isolated by. Which I think is an interesting little distinction. We've got a couple of good mornings. So Squire of the Shies is joining us, saying good morning, Louisa, Helen and Jeff. And Bob's saying, I was inspired in my meditation this morning to focus intensely on welcoming love and light, and to ask that being present would bring healing to those around me. Wow, that's lovely. And it's beautiful that you're joining us here today, Bob. Really wonderful. So where do we go from here?
Well, I want to respond to what you said, if I can, for a minute, because you talk about getting hit by a bus or getting poisoned or, you know, a trauma. Well, really, they're all three traumas.
Yes,
right?
they are.
They're all traumas. So
that's a good point, actually. All three are traumas. I got given medication as a child, just for tonsillitis, and I ended up in hospital because my whole neck swelled up, my tongue swelled up, I could barely breathe. I had to spend a night in hospital, so I was poisoned by the medication I took. Kind of shocking.
Very common.
Some people really need it.
Very common, and that leads into exactly what you were talking about before. Is that by the time we meet people, they've been on a trajectory towards death, right? From original, like a few cases recently, one of the people the care recipients that was prescribed to me by the Center for Healing Neurology passed away about a year ago, and that person, as an example, is very common. Is there's an early childhood trauma that puts them in the hospital, and they get started on the Western medicine path. And from the very beginning, they're on a trajectory. I think I heard yesterday on your podcast that it was a recipe towards a slow death, right?
Yeah.
And it's like they're trying to slow you down on your path towards death. And often we don't meet the people until they really get the point that, wow, this isn't working. The trajectory I'm on, I'm going to die. They're telling me to go. Like this last person I'm talking about who's passed, they said, you know, we've done everything we can. Call hospice. You've got 6 months to live. So she's like, pops her head up and looks around for another way.
Yes.
You know, because they've had the blinders on of the box of Western medicine.
But I can actually relate to what you're saying, not to an extreme and an example of resulting into death, but for my own personal story and my own personal journey, I was that person, you know, due to stored childhood trauma that I was not aware of at the time. I ended up having like really massive trauma, going through the illness of fibroids and westernized medicine. And I went through, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but I took every trial drug going. I had multiple operations, like literally to remove these fibroids. And basically in the end, the options I was given was, you can either continue having trial drugs without knowing what the effects are going to be or the results are going to be, or you can have a hysterectomy. I was like, wow, really? At no point did anybody say to me, why don't you change your diet? You know, let's take a look at what's going on in your diet. And knowing what I know now, you know, if I'd been able to make those changes in my lifestyle and my diet, I would not have had to undergo a hysterectomy of any sort, you know? So relating back to what Jeff is saying, that by the time clients start looking or people start looking for an alternative, we really are on our last legs. It's like a last result. So that's what really shook me up. And I was like, whoa, you know, this cannot be the only solution. How many women are having to undergo unnecessary operations like this, when in reality they could have been completely avoided with some nutritional changes and, you know, balances and of a lifestyle and food and exercise and, you know, all the other things that the body requires to function optimally. But yeah, it was a real wake-up call. That's like literally we are at the come to Jesus moment, right? By the time we start looking for so-called alternatives.
Well, you're right, because like, you know, people do turn to religion, don't they, at times like this? You know, when they think their back's against the wall and they don't know what else to do, that's when all of a sudden people's imagination and also their desire to believe in something that might help them comes to the fore. And that might include going and seeing somebody like, I'm presuming you also cleared some trauma about your childhood, Helen. You mentioned your diet, but I imagine there was some trauma there. Was there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, when you spend most of your lifetime bouncing from one country to the next and going from one school to another and, you know, going through all of those changes, and fear of abandonment was one of the biggest traumas that, you know, needed to be shifted. And that's a big one, right? So, I had a lot of childhood trauma clearance to do in order to actually enable me to show up for others and be able to do what I can for them and help them along their journey as well. I needed to dive deep within my own childhood drama and traumas. I meant to say traumas, but okay, childhood dramas. Thank you for that. So yeah, I needed to dive really deep into that and just, you know, take a look at what needed clearing. And of course, you know, as you begin to clear one thing, be prepared for a next thing to show up. You know, Jeff and I have been doing some work on myself and also doing some work on Jeff. So we've been working on each other. And it's been really interesting to see the journey of STIR unfold and the impact that we're both experiencing along the way. It's fun, but also be prepared for the other side where you just really have to face your shadows and move through them.
Yeah, there's a few things that I want to touch on there. First of all, a nice hello. We've got somebody, it's one of your supporters. I don't know whose it is, but Fanboyage is saying, thank you for this informative conversation. And we love these open discussions. They're needed. I agree. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate that. And I don't know what time it is where you are, but yeah, thank you. The other thing was you mentioned STIR, and I'm pretty sure that's going to come into this conversation because we're talking about how to biohack the effects of trauma. And I first learned about STIR. STIR is sorry, Jeff, is STIR your concept? I believe it is. It's somatic trauma imprint release, if I got that right.
Yep.
Yeah. I've got it on my notes. But it's always good to just double check. Because when I was listening to one of our old interviews or chats earlier this morning, I think it was the, I don't know, the Spiral of Ascension, we were having a conversation and you were talking about how we can do it for each other. And there was a conversation about like me breastfeeding my children. And I'd noticed that where I'd had some illnesses, the two children that I was breastfeeding had sort of a mimicry of what was going on. And my third child, who I wasn't breastfeeding, wasn't. And so we were talking about energetic resonances. And you were talking about STIR, and it reminded me, isn't it really funny how often we do something 2 years ago, we learn something 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And then when you listen back to it later, you realize, oh my God, I've always had the answer to this problem I'm actually experiencing right now. Only I'd listened. So I'm about to deep dive back into all the old material and start to use your techniques. Because in the last 2 years or so, your whole technique, which I'm sure you're going to start to explain, I realize it's time for it now. Maybe I wasn't ready for it before, but the whole releasing of trauma very consciously, I can see where it is in my body now. I know where it is. I know where to go. Yeah. So do you want to talk a bit about it and how you came across it in your journey? Because I think it was because of McCoy, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It started with McCoy and his surgical sites. And he had a orthoscopic surgery, and they went in between his ribs, and he was, depleted quite a bit from the treatment through chemotherapy and radiation and all that. And it was very, very tender, and he was very vulnerable. And he came out of surgery with just 3 little, orthoscopic, just little tiny entry points. But out of one of them, there was a suction tube and a ball, a suction ball, because they want to keep all the fluid out of there. So the surgeon came by in the middle of the night, and she says, well, let's take that ball out. You guys are awake. Let's go ahead and take that. Everything looks good. Let's take it out. And we're going to need to change this dressing, because I have to put a dressing over it. We're going to have to change this dressing in 48 hours. And he was very sensitive, and it was really hard for him to even open up his arm to let her do it. And no anesthetic, we were doing breath work, and, no pain, no injection or anything. So, he faced that. We got through it with our routine, and she was like noticing how we put our foreheads together and how we breathed and what we're doing, and made comments about it. And, she's, that's part of your success, and we'd love to see it, and that type of thing. But what I had to face is the fact that I was going to need to change that dressing in 48 hours, and it was completely guarded. There's no way I'm going to get my hand in there. So what I did is I said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to raise my hand, and I just want you to think about lifting your arm. Don't lift your arm. Just think about lifting your arm. So we did that, and we did it over and over. And this is not something I'd ever done before. This is just the download, right? So we did that over and over. And what it was doing was desensitizing his reaction to my hand, because he knew I had to do that in 2 days, right? He knew I had to do that. He knew it was coming. So everything about him is guarded, right? You're in a protective mode. He's 5, right? So later on, I would say, okay, now I'm going to put up my hand, and you're going to lift your arm a little bit. And we kept doing it. And I'm going to get a little closer. And then pretty soon I could put my hand in his armpit. And then before you knew it, he was holding his hand up like this, and I'm able to clean it and change the dressing within 48 hours. So I started researching that. And that was really the MO of everything that we've put together, is that we'd be in a stressful situation, a download would come of what to do. And from that, I'd be like, okay, I better research that. How did we do that? What was it? And how can I recreate it again next time if we need it? So that led all the way to STIR.
Wow. There was something that I was just writing down as you finished that. Because it just reminds me of so many of our other conversations. But you were saying you had a stressful situation, you had a download, and then you backed it up with research and science so that you could. And I want to come back to that later on. But
that's extremely important point. So yeah.
I mean, because I know that you talk about from crisis to creation, and I was like, that's crisis to creation. So there's a stressful situation, and you are getting yourself into a resourceful state, even though it must be really hard to keep your head. And I'd like to find out how you do that. I think I know, but I think it'd be useful to share. So you got a stressful situation. You are creating a state for yourself whereby you're able to download information or hear, connect into a divine source or your own source. I'm sure everyone's got different terminology for it. That feeling of knowing that is available to us all. And then from that, what to do. And then you check in with other research and you trial it. That's really powerful. When you were telling me that story about your son, McCoy, I can really appreciate how difficult that must be. I was trying to clean my son's fingernails today, and he's going to be 5 next week. I can never even get to underneath his, he is wriggly. He won't let me do it at all. And it's one of the most difficult things. I have no idea how you had the patience and the calm and the resources, the emotional resources to be able to work with McCoy like that. It's incredible what you've managed to do. And anyone that's got a wriggly 5-year-old or a hurt 5-year-old, I mean, I think we're all rolling your eyes and going, oh my God, how did you do that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And that's very fair. I mean, you know, daily things like that are hard when you're in a moment like that. And any parent, I mean, I've met hundreds of families when we lived at the Ronald McDonald House for 4.5 years, right?
Yeah.
And those that are capable of showing up and being in the moment fare a lot better than those who don't. That's a very, very definite point. And one of the things that I make clear is that we're biohacking a physiological state of receivership, of being an open channel. And you talk about the download is if you are triggered in fight or flight and you're in left brain, like, how do I put out fire? How do I run? How do I survive? You're in a survival mode. You're only able to access the information you have on board. It's like working on a computer that's not hooked to the Wi-Fi. You only have access. You only have access to what's on your computer.
Yeah.
And that's the state you're in when you're triggered. When you can be at zero, when you can get yourself to zero, like Creating from Zero, one of the shows we did, right? When you're at zero, then you're an open channel and you're like hooked to the Wi-Fi and you have infinite possibilities. So what we say, it's like convergent focus is there's a stimulus, a stressor, and a reaction. There's the only thing based on history. If this happens again, I'm going to react the same way to survive. That's how we're made. Okay. So when there's a stressor and you have divergent focus, when you're an open channel, then there's one stressor and infinite possibilities. And that's how we get the download, is by being the open channel. And this is the key to what we do together, because if you're not in a state of receivership for your nutrition, you're not going to process it properly and it's not going to do you any good. You could eat the best food possible, but if you're in a state of fight or flight, you're not in rest and digest. You cannot digest your food when you're triggered. And we live our lives triggered in the Western world.
And that's one of the reasons you talk about the state of receivership. And again, I'm just relating this back to when I'm working with clients. I like to get to know them a little bit better through the consultations. And that really gives me a really good indication in terms of how I then lay out their protocol. Because the last thing I want to do is give them a protocol that is going to trigger them, because it doesn't fit into their daily routine and schedule, or if there's anything on the protocol that they cannot eat, they don't like, all of these things can trigger them and put them into that fight or flight or fear or flight. Yeah, I can't
freeze. Apparently, some people freeze as well.
And freeze, right? It's 2 a.m. You'll excuse me. But yeah,
3 a.m. for you now. Bless you.
Yeah, close, very close. But yeah, so, that triggers cortisol levels to also, heightened, which means that it doesn't matter how good that protocol is or how good I think that protocol is. If it's triggering someone and their cortisol levels are high, they are not in a state of receivership for that. So that's why it's really important for me to just, get the SP on who they are so that I can fit protocols into their daily life. So it's easier for them. And I'm not giving them stuff that, they can't take. I mean, some people can't swallow pills, so if I put like capsules on there, the first thing they're going to go, I can't do that. It's too much. So yeah, just backing up what you're saying from the holistic
That's
side of
perfect.
things.
Perfect.
You know what? I really love the synergy that you guys have got, because I'm hearing you, Jeff, talking about the state of receivership from a position of like the sort of spiritual, emotional, and thought-based reality. And I'm
Mind,
hearing
body,
the same.
spirit.
Yeah, mind, body, spirit. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm hearing you really talking about it from a physical perspective, Helen, and also with a mind, body, spirit as well. And it was interesting, you said you can't digest what you eat. Like if you're not in a state of receivership, you can't digest. Interestingly, a lot of the illnesses that Dr. Hammer talks about in German New Medicine are because of us not being able to digest shocking events. Like we can't digest emotional things that have happened to us. We can't digest. So all these things that we can't quite process, they get stuck in the nose, the throat, down, all basically down our processing. So that it's interesting that it can happen emotionally and physically and spiritually. I love how this is all linking up. We've got Bob saying powerful, Jeff. You're powerful. And
He is. He's super powerful. I agree. I totally agree.
He's saying convergent focus or divergent open channel. I like that. I love that. And Owen is saying, I love the fact that I'm having a light bulb moment. Thank you. Owen, tell us about it. Is it one you can share? I love that. Thank you.
So, Louisa, just to go back over what you were saying, that you love the synergy between Jeff and I. I love the synergy between Jeff and I because he is amazing. He truly is amazing. I particularly love the fact that, you know, with the holistic work that I do, I don't need to get into the science of everything of how it works, right? Because most of the way that I work is through downloads most of the time. I get channels of over, you know, what's happening in somebody's body and how to, what best to suggest to them in order to remedy that illness that or condition that they've got. And what Jeff does is like, he will come in and explain the science about, you know, how what I do works from a scientific perspective. So I really love that. I love that he's such a science geek. It works for me.
Yeah, I think a real important takeaway from that was leading in this conversation is, like Helen said, she wants to really get to know the person and see what their lifestyle can handle in a change. And that connection, listening and being heard and felt, is said to be the first step towards healing. Is feeling felt and heard and met where you're actually at, being honest with somebody about where you're actually at, because that's the only way. Like you can't ask your GPS to get you to a certain spot if you're telling it you're somewhere else when you're beginning. You cannot get there with the same instructions, the directions, right? You have to be true about where you're at. So you make it something the person believes in. Right. And we all know the power of the placebo, right? Yeah. If you can take a sugar pill and think it's chemotherapy and your hair falls out, then the power of belief is pretty strong. So if you don't believe in the protocol you have, then you're really not going to follow it. Right. Yeah. So you have to have it in digestible pieces and get the person in a state of receivership to even take it. Yeah. Right. That's a very important beginning.
Yeah, and a white coat often helps, doesn't it? You know, the label of doctor or police officer or teacher, or, you know, we are educated from an early age to pay more attention to people in uniforms.
Yeah, that's literally called the white coat syndrome, right?
Yeah. I've got a question. I've got a question actually as well, but I'm going to go with this one from Carl. Jeff, you legend. There you go. That's not the question. How can people tell if they are triggered when they don't think they are? And Bob is saying, great question. He wants to know that too.
Carl, you're awesome.
What are the physiology? Like how what's the first thing to recognize that you're being triggered by something?
Oh, it's a really important point because we have this set point we get in. You know, it's like, if you're hunched over all the time, it's hard to straighten up, right? Your body will take a set. You get used to things, right? These are the parameters I'm used to. People that work in stress, they don't notice because this is normal, right? So the way that you notice, if you're, first of all, like Carl says, there has to be an awareness that there's something different available than the stress that we're in. So that's what we're bringing. We're bringing awareness, right? And we were talking about this the other day, awareness, understanding, and adjustment.
Oh my God, we were, weren't we?
Yes, we were, of course.
Yeah. And I remember you liked that.
I really did. And I forgot it straight after. Awareness,
now that we know, now that we're aware,
yeah,
how can we understand? And then how can we make an adjustment?
Yeah.
So when you're aware that there's an alternative medicine, then you can make a change. You can do something about it, right? So we get in such a set rhythm of our energy and our routines that we don't notice, right? So, okay, let's just stop. Let's just check. So the coherence breathing that I bring forward is a perfect way, because at any point in the day, without a heart math tool, without a watch that you have to wear, without any equipment at all, you can just touch. You can just mindfully say, I'm going to check in with my body. I'm going to see what my heart's doing. Okay. Your heart has the intelligence. It speaks to the brain and mind body in 8 different ways. And it conducts the orchestra of every cell in your body, every moment of your life. Your heart does. Okay. Whether you know it or not. So you check in with your heart. You check in with your heart. You mindfully connect with your heart on your wrist or anywhere, and you count your heartbeats. And if your heartbeat's going fast and it's got a lot of pressure and it's just speeding up, or it's at a constant high rate, then you're triggered, right? And there are other signs in your body. Your hands can be clammy. Your breathing will be shallow. You know, the trigger of fight or flight sets up a cavalcade of responses in your body that give you signals of what's going on, but you just have to pay attention and you have to be aware that they're there. So to me, if your heartbeat is speeding up when you breathe in and it's slowing down when you breathe out, then you're in balance. You're in homeostasis. You're not triggered, right? So if you're wondering if you're triggered and you just use this to check, it's automatically going to biohack you into a parasympathetic state. So it's perfect for checking and adjusting.
And if anyone is curious about how to do your coherence breathing, we've got a video on this channel.
We do.
It's the reset breathing, the coherence breathing. And I think I've already put the links in the show notes, but I will make it even clearer in the show notes after. And I think I'll put links in the actual comments underneath as well to each video that we've done, because it's really worth doing. It's a 5-minute routine. And it's just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
So good.
Sorry, we were laughing because Jeff was when he just banged into the table and everything just went.
Yeah, I made an adjustment without some understanding. Yeah. It's like every time I touch the table, it flickers the lights or does something. So he's laughing.
Powerful.
Oh yeah.
Carl, I think Carl is actually going to put our monitor and our camera, actually attach it to the wall, because every time I'm really clumsy. Every time I like take a note, you can see I'm writing.
That's so funny because sorry. That's really hilarious because as we were setting up all the lighting and everything, Jeff was saying, we should probably put that light and mount it in that corner, or just get an extra light to go in that corner. So it's funny that you guys were having a similar conversation there.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. So we've got coherence breathing. So that's definitely one way to biohack and start working to help to release some of the stored energy, and to get back into a coherent state. What other things can you do? as a as a step, I mean, obviously you've said awareness, understanding, and adjustment. And Bob obviously likes that because he's celebrating that with emojis. Like, what would you say? Like, if somebody has been going through a series of tests, or they're feeling their health change and they don't quite understand what's going on, what would you say the first steps are?
I've kind of drawn a blank right now.
Yeah,
It's really early. Let me share some other comments. So we've got Owen saying, I've buried my traumas. I'm guessing that's knowingly, but with this, it has dampened my intuitive ability. Isn't that incredible how that fits in? I can connect this with the digestive issues I've been suffering from for some time. I now know to let this trauma go, and it will allow me to be me again. Oh,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
You're a legend too.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely beautiful. Owen, I would say with the trauma release also, the energetic trauma release goes hand in hand with the lifestyle change as well, and the healthy eating, the cleansing out of. So if you've had digestive issues, then I highly recommend that you also do some sort of cleanse, because with trauma storage comes other issues that need clearing through.
Yeah, and that Owen, thank you for that share. And it really is poignant to what we're talking about, because Louisa, you just asked, besides checking with yourself and doing the breathing, what other things can you do? Once it becomes aware and you have an understanding and you make an adjustment, you can say, okay, if I'm in a state of being constantly triggered, what can I do to unwind this? Okay. Yeah. So what plays in the circadian rhythm? If you get up at 1 a.m. for a show, it's going to break up your circadian rhythm, and you're going to pay a little price, right? So if you look at what you're eating, because food is a trigger, right? Being hungry is a trigger. People don't realize this, but early on, when we had to forage for our food, hunter-gatherer, we would go days without eating, and then we would feast and famine, right? So being hungry triggers you into fight or flight. It gets you out of the cave, away from the fire, and we better get some more food, right? And you're going to face something that could probably kill you. Whoever wins gets to eat the other, right? So that's a pretty important thing. Being triggered. So if you are hungry and you're shopping, you're going to get things that aren't healthy for you. If you're triggered and you're cooking, you're going to cook in a way that's not healthy for you, bad energy and everything. So if once you're aware, then there's lots of things we can do. We as a team add so many things into people's lives that they can make little adjustments here and there. And I'm going to give myself as a little testimonial for Helen. I was doing like juicing every morning at 8 o'clock, and I was eating my avocado and garlic and salmon at noon, intermittent fasting. And I was doing this, all this exercise and all this stuff. And she moves in, and, you might not want to juice that anymore. And you might, that's a little too much garlic. So why don't you do that 3 days a week instead of 7, And I made 2-3 little adjustments, and without working out or really, suffering on my diet, I've lost 35 pounds, and I've lost all the inflammation in my shoulders and elbows, and my clarity, my sleep, my everything changed with a few little tweaks and adjustments from this.
That goddess sat next to you.
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing. It's amazing. But again, I'm going to have success with that because she met me where I was. Yeah. She didn't trigger me with a diagnosis and a big protocol right now. It's like little adjustments, and I'm in a state of receivership. I believe in her. I'm dedicated. I'm mindful, And it's amazing what can happen. So we are showing up to be testimonials for what we're bringing forward, just like the stir. It's great to be alone and not lonely and all that good stuff, but there are certain things that humans can only experience with a partner, right? We're made to be with somebody, right? And we can't really find out what our potential is until we show up with somebody and become that emergent total and take that quantum leap. And, you know, everything that we talk about in our shows, that's what's happening, right? By coming together. And with stir, that turns out to be one of the most powerful discoveries of this reunion, is that when couples work with stir, and they show up with a unified belief system and intent, and mindfully, heartfully show up, and they can be open and vulnerable, but still feel safe. Like, these are the three requirements to release trauma, right? Is that you have to feel safe, like it's not going to happen again. You have to feel supported, that you've got the support you need when things come out, right? You know, you need somebody to be there for you, and that you're not in danger of losing that person because you reveal something of yourself, right? And then you have to be expansive. The third thing is expansive. And that word can be a little vague, but you have to be in an expansive state, because we all have that growth or protection, right? If you're in the protective fight or flight, you're not going to do it. But if you're in that open growth state, then you're in an expansive state. And this also speaks to the point you were talking about before, is because trauma, in order for a trauma event to be recorded in the body, which it does, it has to feel inescapable. That's a key point. And there's two types of traumas: too much too fast, and too little for too long, right? Those are the two key points of trauma. Is, you know, abusive trauma is usually too much too fast. That's, I'm too young, you know, you're hurting me, that sort of thing. And not enough for
too little.
Too much too fast, and too little for too long. So if you're being neglected, so if you say the two sides, if you're being attacked, okay, you're going to set up a whole aspect of yourself to deal with that, right? But if you're being neglected, it's going to be a whole different aspect of yourself that has to be generated in order to deal with neglect, like anxiety and detachment, you know, those sort of things, abandonment, right? There's two different types of trauma, and for they both need to feel inescapable in order to be stored. So that's a key point. In understanding, we can make an adjustment of how to release that trauma that's stored, because it's a message, it's a signal of how to survive it again next time. It's a wonderful mechanism that we're made with. It's how we've survived millennia, but it also can be, this is another key point, any stressor in an environment is made for growth, for survival. So if you make it forces you to make an adjustment. Okay. So that's an adaptive stress response. You've adapted to survive. That's a good thing, right? Stress is a good thing. So then when it's repeated over and over in trauma, too much too fast, or too little for too long, then it becomes a maladaptive stress response. Then you respond that way even if there's no danger. It becomes such a trigger that it just becomes your automatic response. It's like the aspect of yourself that shows up every day instead of your true self.
That's incredible. We've got a couple of questions coming in, and I see your camera's frozen.
Yeah,
I'm
we're
just going
frozen.
to take.
So are you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, frozen at our end as well. So
That's so weird. What's weird is when we all like get frozen in weird positions. I'm going to just read out these comments, take you off the screen and bring you back on to see if that brings you back.
Okay.
One sec. Okay, so we've got a question from Bob. He's saying, can you give us the words for stir again, please? And I've just put it in the notes, which is somatic trauma imprint release. And with the somatic trauma imprint release, Jeff and I have recorded 2 videos, Stir 1 and Stir 2. They're on this channel, the Barefoot Broadcast. If you search for Stir or Jeff Granville, hopefully they'll come up. I will put them in the notes so that you can find them. And then Bob, you've just said too much, too fast, too little, too long, 2 types of trauma. Oh, it looks like I've actually lost Helen and Jeff now. That's a real shame. They might come back. Hopefully they will. My whole journey, I'll talk about Jeff. You know, my journey with Jeff, the first time I met him, which was to interview him in, before the Higher Self Expo, it was to find out about his journey as a father, and to find out about what he learnt. Jeff, I was just about to fill in some blanks about the McCoy journey, because when I first met you, we did a recording, and I think it was called A Parent's Worst Nightmare, How Mindfulness Saved Your Son.
That's how we met.
From that interview.
It was on that podcast. I saw that podcast, and I was really in tune to what Jeff was saying and Jeff's story and everything that you guys were talking about on the podcast. And I remember just contacting you and saying, hey, who was that guy you were talking to? I'd really love to interview him for my show as well. And then you passed the contacts, and we've been in touch ever since. It was 3 years ago or so.
It's magical, isn't it? I was so moved by your story. And so anyone, I think, that's listening today or listening in catch up that is really sort of fascinated and wanting to dive a little deeper, I really recommend listening to that podcast. It was really mind-blowing. It's amazing. Go on.
Well, no, I was just going to say it's mind-blowing for me too, because the further I get away in time and I change and develop and learn more about what we actually did, the more it blows my mind. Because like you said, the more time goes by, the more I research and the more I coagulate this, coalesce this way of being, how I show up. And then I look back at what we did, and I'm just taken by it. I really, it's an out of body experience. It's really, there is zero ego credit that I give myself at all. It is all divine. Absolutely. And yeah, I showed up. Yes, I did what needed, and I love it. I'm very proud of myself, but it is definitely the fact that I was in a position from that very first intervention that they had to do, the lumbar puncture, and the PICC line placement. Those first 2 procedures is what set up this whole thing. And if I would have been angry at the doctors or angry at God or stuck in that, I would have been working off what I had in my computer, right? So, but the fact that I was so struck by the situation, literally fell to my knees in the moment and just gave up. Not gave up, not like I give up, but you just give up that ego. And you're like, I don't know the language. I don't like hospitals. I have nothing to offer. What am I supposed to do? And I fall to my knees, and in the moment it came to me is that you just have to be present. You just have to be here for him. And the downloads came. It's just how it happens. So it's like, oh, that was a sweet spot, that we lived through that. And I always say a 4-year-old should never have to learn the literal definition of do or die, right? Yeah. So it's that type of situation is what it took for me. And I actually, it was a care recipient I was working with that was hearing this story that said, well, not only did you get the download for McCoy, but you got the download of how to be the dad he needed. It's like everybody in the room got the download. We were talking about this in the birthing process, is the birthing process is such a singularity. There's a point where you'll never be the same, just like conception is a singularity, right? You'll never be the same. But when you're having a baby, the moment the baby is there, the portals open, creation, everything, the most magical moment of the universe is happening, right? Is birth. So everybody in the room is affected by that moment, right? So just like that in the medical situation, or in a interview, or in a life moment, it's all common. It's all the same. If you receive something in a trigger, then it's usually a no, right?
Yeah.
The right brain and the openness to divinity is a yes. I'm open. The trigger is always a no, right? So Helen would not have been open to me or the relationship or moving or any of the things she's done to make this union happen if she was in a no receivership state. If she would have listened to her old triggers, we wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so pleased you are.
It works throughout life. It's part of the recipe of how we're built.
Yeah. I absolutely love and just honor. I'm so grateful for you both to show up. I'm grateful for you both in my life and what I've learned from you. I feel like I've had more than enough time, and it's like 5 minutes past 3 where you are right now. I know I'd want to go back to bed or something, but I think I want to wrap this up. And if you're welcome, if you'd like to come back and talk another time, we could even pre-record it so you don't have to get up really early. But I would love to continue this connection. We're getting some last minute comments coming in. Angie Hallsworth King is saying, looking forward to catching up with this later after work. Isn't that nice that Angie's joined us?
Hi,
Angie. We've got Bob was saying surrender. It was like when you surrendered, you got on your knees.
Yep.
You're saying, what was the name of that podcast, or a link maybe? There'll be a link below, Bob. Or I'll make sure that there is one, but it was called A Parent's Worst Nightmare, How Mindfulness Saved a Life. Squire of the Shies is saying, thank you for resonating words of knowledge and wisdom today. You're so welcome. Owen is saying, Jeff, Helen, sleep well, and thank you. Louisa, thank you for putting the show together. Have a beautiful weekend, everyone. And then Squire of the Shies, listening to you all helps us understand ourselves better and to seek and find that harmonious balance. Oh, yeah. So true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have you got a last thought to go into the day with, or go into the weekend with, you guys?
Yeah.
Well, for me, I feel like we're just starting. I'm looking down. Stop already. I'm just getting going.
Yeah. He is just getting going.
Oh,
He's
man.
got a lot of information.
Yeah. One of the a little point, I won't make this long, but one of the most important points that was being made throughout this conversation was about how you talked about the Western medicine has either a chemical or a scalpel. Right? And if you get hit by a bus, there's no better place in the world than a Western medicine triage, right?
Yes.
But after that, so the whole thing about holistic, where we see them in the end, in their 11th hour, okay, our whole mission is to reverse that. To where in every community, there's a holistic center where you can go in and get help and advice. And that's the screening. That's the true meaning of first do no harm.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So instead of us seeing them in the 11th hour, let's see them in the first hour.
Yes.
Let's see the moms before they get pregnant. Let's see the moms when they're pregnant. Let's see them when they first experience trauma, not when the child is 35 years old and in the 11th hour of a medical trajectory. So to me, that's an important part.
Wow.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I agree with that. Most people I'm seeing at the moment are in the 11th hour. And it's really like, it's a sad situation to see, but that's the reality at the moment. Yeah.
And,
Oh, wow.
and not to end that on a down note at all, because now that we're aware and we understand, we can make that adjustment.
Yes, we know we have a choice.
Yeah.
That's the powerful point.
I want to go back to quickly something that you mentioned earlier about couples and with us having worked.
Oh, yes, I had a question actually. Sorry.
Thank
Do
you.
your question first, Helen. Do you want to do your...
Okay, so with us having worked together, we have been talking about doing, and we are working on doing like couples sessions and couples group coaching and couples workshops and things like that with regards to trauma, because when you come together as a couple, everybody has a history, right? And integrating as a couple, if you don't understand where the other person has come from, there's so many miscommunications and so many issues that can, and challenges that can actually be resolved by understanding each other's journey and each other's story in a safe, secure environment. So that's just what I wanted to say.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And thank you for doing that, because I think that's really important. And thank you for mentioning that. I did have one comment. I know that, you know, not everyone has found their forever partner or their right now partner that they can trust. Well, how can people that feel like maybe they don't have somebody around them, how can they make stir work for them? Or, you know, because earlier we were all talking about how lucky we are when we're in that sort of partnership that we can, and I do feel like that with Mr. M. You know, I've touched on so many things that I couldn't have done before I met him, and vice versa. But what do we do if we haven't found that person?
I would like to say that the best thing you can do is to get clarity with yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing, the word I haven't used today is, I think, is authenticity, which is the other major part of what we've integrated, is showing up as your authentic self. So if you're showing up, and you know, it goes along with so many teachings about abundance and you know, The Secret and all this stuff, is the law of attraction, is that you have to radiate and imagine what you want to bring it to you, right? If you're in a state of want or need or lack, you're not going to be in a state of receivership, because that's a left brain trigger, and you're reacting out of habit.
Yeah.
And you're more likely going to repeat the same mistakes you've made in the past if you're reacting out of that spot. So when you stir on yourself, and when you get treatment for your own trauma, and you can show up as an open vessel from zero, and then you start radiating your true authentic self, then you're going to send that out to the universe, and that's what's going to come back to you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So,
thank you so much. And just in the light that, you know, one of my videos has been taken down from YouTube, in case this one does, it will also be on it'll also be on Rumble. So just go to the Barefoot Broadcast on Rumble, and it will be there too. Right, I think we should wrap this up. Would you mind just staying online after after I close it down, because I'd like to thank you personally. But thank you to everyone that's watched today, everyone that's got involved, commented, shared their perspectives, and also if you're listening along a bit later on, really appreciate you. I really do think these are co-created, that our combined energy is really shaping everything. And I just hope that we can all connect again real soon. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of day and weekend, and hopefully we'll catch up real soon. Lots of love.
Lots of love.
Everybody.
Thanks.